Hey, welcome to Church for Skeptics. My name is Dan Arsenault. If you happen to be a first-time watcher here, I was an atheist. At least I called myself an atheist, and I certainly leaned that way in my teens and in my early 20s. And I had the same arguments against Christianity, the same arguments against God that probably you have. I thought that the Bible had been corrupted, that we didn't even have the originals. And there are others who think that as well, of course. And I thought that there was way too much evil and suffering. This is number one, evil and suffering in the world for there to be a loving God that exists. And then number three, I thought science had disqualified or disproven pretty much all religions. I had all three of those ideas. And so kind of that's where we're headed back. Why did I become a believer after that? Well, I'm going to talk about God's existence in this episode here from a philosophical standpoint. And by the way, when I became a Christian, I was getting a degree in philosophy at Vanderbilt University. This was way back in the 1970s. So today we want to talk about God's existence. And here's, if I want to title this, it's why God's existence is absolutely necessary. Honestly, I think it's a no-brainer. I think that God's existence is a no-brainer, and I'll show you some scripture here in a bit. Well, let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to show you a scripture here that this is Romans 1, 19 through 20. It's the English Standard Version here. It says, "For what can be known about God," verse 19, "is plain to them, because God has shown it to them." And that's a big statement. "For his invisible attributes, namely," and I've tried to highlight this, "his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse." Now let me come back to me. That's a bold statement that Scripture makes, but I would heartily agree with it. Is there a God? Does God have to necessarily exist? Now, park all that. That's all introduction. Here's my argument. Everything that exists from a philosophical standpoint is either contingent, which means it's dependent on something else for its existence. It didn't have to exist, or it's necessary. It had to exist. It can't not exist. Well, can you think of anything in your existence, in your experience, can you think of anything that is not contingent, that just absolutely has to exist? I'll use myself as example. I didn't have to be born. I didn't have to exist. There are a host of causes and effects, going back a long time, that play into, if you want to go all the way back to the first life, there are a host of things that play into causes and effects for me to exist, but I didn't have to exist. You didn't have to exist. And I would say that's the same about the whole experience that we have in our lives. So my big point is here, the universe itself must necessarily, and that's not a good word to use, I'm trying to coagulate the two, the universe itself must be contingent. In other words, it's dependent on something. If you use the old Kalam argument that the Islamic scholars used, it would be this: everything that has a beginning must have a cause. Let me say it again. Everything that has a beginning must have a cause. Now, since the universe has a beginning, now watch this. I love this part. Since the universe has a beginning, there must be a time, we'll call that before time, that it did not exist. Let me say it again. If the universe had a beginning, and now everybody agrees with that, we call it Big Bang cosmology. There has to be a time that the universe did not exist if the universe had a beginning. I hope that's easy for you. So that means if there was a time necessarily, or has to be so, that the universe did not exist, then the universe has to be contingent. It can't be necessary. It can't be eternal, in other words. So we have this dilemma. of where the universe is. Remember, I'm going back to Romans chapter 1 when it says that the creation itself is the proof that God does exist. And that's my whole premise here, is that God's existence is necessary. Everything else is contingent. So the dilemma of the universe is, the philosopher's most basic question is, why does something exist rather than nothing? Now, why can't the universe be infinite? Why can't the universe be eternal? And to try to get through this pretty quickly, because it is unchanging. The universe cannot be eternal, although that's what they thought up until the 20th century. But it can't be because it's changing. And let me give you a couple of examples of change. The universe is expanding. The rate of that expansion is called the cosmological constant. It's also drawing together to some degree. Expansion's winning, but it's winning gradually. And so we have the law of gravity and the law of expansion, the cosmological constant here. It also is running out of energy, and we call that entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. Now, if that's the case, if the universe is expanding, there was a time back far enough that it did not exist. Expands from nothing. They call that the singularity. Now, here's the point. If the universe had been here forever, you could not get to this particular day, this particular effect, if you want to call it that. So you have a list of causes and effects. That's what change is. Every change is an effect. So that means every change needs a cause to cause that effect. But if you try to go through an infinite number of causes and effects to get to this effect, you never get there. That's what infinity does. My point is this: infinity is a great idea, but it's not real. You cannot actualize infinity. So, just from a plain mathematical, logical, reasonable stand here, the universe can't possibly have been here forever. Because we are in this time, we're in this day. You're watching this video at this particular time. That's really important, because that means that, number one, the universe is not infinite. The universe is contingent. But here's the other problem: that when you go back to, you can't keep going back. You can't say what caused that, what caused that, what caused that, what caused that, to infinity, because you never get to this point. So there has to be a beginning point, but that beginning would be called what? The first cause. And the first cause must, here we go, this is just logic. The first cause must of necessity, now we're using the word correctly, the first cause of everything, in particular the universe, the first cause of the universe must be uncaused. Otherwise, it wouldn't be first. And if it's first, if they say, well, what caused that? Well, if you say that, it's not first, is it? You have to go a prior cause that. So the first cause, there has to be an eternal. Uncaused equals eternal, right? If it's been here forever, it's never been caused. It is not self-caused. Nothing is self-caused. It would have to exist before it existed. So it's just plain and simple. There has to be an eternal first cause for everything else. That means everything is contingent except for that eternal first cause. Now we're creeping up to the necessity of God's existence here. Richard Dawkins wrote a book. He's a if you don't know who he is already, a prominent atheist and a biologist at Oxford University. And he wrote a book several years ago called The God Delusion. And in chapter 4 of that book, I've read it a couple times. Chapter 4, here's the title of that: Why There Almost Certainly Is No God. And when I saw that chapter title, I thought, uh-oh, maybe I'm in trouble here. Maybe there's something I really got to figure out here, or maybe I'm going to have to really dig and try to counter this argument here. And I read the chapter twice, and I thought, wait a minute, what's he saying here? What's his slam dunk? This is the cleanup hitter here. And so, what's his argument? That there almost certainly is no God, and here it is. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I promise you this is what he says. If God made everything, who made God? That's his argument. And I thought, he's missing the whole point of everything I've just been saying. And the whole point is there has to be, of necessity, an eternal first cause that is outside of everything that the universe is. So whatever that eternal first cause is, it has to be obviously eternal, timeless, has to be spaceless, because that's what the universe is, space. Space came into being at the Big Bang, at the beginning of the universe. So timeless, eternal, spaceless. Obviously, it has to be, the first cause has to be omnipotent, because it's creating everything else. It is the necessary cause for everything else that is contingent, depending on that power. It also has to be immaterial. The eternal first cause cannot be matter, because that's exactly what the universe is. The universe is all matter, all space, and all time. And my point here is, I've done this with several people, several atheist friends, and I say, look, can I get you to this point of believing there has to be an eternal first cause for everything? And they say, yeah, but it's not necessarily God. Okay, but it sure looks a lot like God. He's eternal, timeless, omnipotent, and we'll make the case next time. He's also personal. I hope this hooks you a little bit, and we'll come back and talk about these things again. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Church for Skeptics. Please check out our other videos on our YouTube channel, like and subscribe. Visit us at churchforskeptics.com and look for Church for Skeptics on Facebook. Thanks again, and we hope to see you soon.